Today we're painting these snowflake cards, and they're so much easier than they look. Anyone can do this, even beginners. This is an extremely relaxing watercolor painting technique and hopefully an equally relaxing tutorial to watch. We're going to turn one sheet of watercolor paper into 2 cards. Or you could paint the full sheet and make 4 card fronts that you can mount onto blank cards. Be sure to watch to the end because I have a few ideas to make these cards extra special. Anyone you give them to is going to love receiving your hand-painted cards. You can use any watercolor paper for this project. We'll only be doing a couple layers of wet on dry painting, so this project is perfect for cheaper watercolor papers. I'm using 9 by 12 inch Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. Since it's not 100% cotton, I'm going to get extra texture with blooms and uneven drying, but for these snowflakes, that's okay. To keep these cards super simple, I'm tracing a snowflake cookie cutter. I actually have 2 different sizes, but you only need 1. If you don't have a snowflake, you could use a star, a bell, a Christmas tree, a bird, any shape will work. If you don't have cookie cutters, you can download and trace this free snowflake printable I made for you. My paper is 9 by 12 inches and I taped it to a plexiglass board with the tape overlapping the paper 1/4 inch all the way around. I also put a piece of tape vertically down the page to the left of center. We're only going to paint the right half of the page. The left side will be the back of the card. We're going to use a simple negative painting technique to paint the background around these snowflakes. It's really important that none of the snowflakes are touching on this first layer. Leave space in between them. Also, leave some larger open spaces because we'll be doing another layer of snowflakes. Once you have your first layer of snowflakes traced, it's time to paint the background. But first, use a kneaded eraser to lighten your pencil lines. Mix up a watery consistency of paint. I made a big puddle on my palette. You don't want to have to stop too many times to mix up more paint. You only need 1 color of paint. I'm using cobalt blue. If you want more granulation and depth, you could use French ultramarine. If you want a more vibrant blue, you could use phthalo blue. Grab a brush you're comfortable maneuvering. For beginners, a round brush would be a good choice. I'm using a small dagger brush because it holds lots of paint and has a nice point for small areas. But a dagger brush takes some practice. If you have a dagger brush and know how to use it, it's my favorite for negative painting. We're going to start at the top and paint the background around the snowflakes. When I'm doing large, complicated washes like this, I like to enlist the help of gravity. I prop my board up on my roll of tape so the paint beads up and helps me keep a wet edge longer. I'm using my brush to carry the bead of paint down the page, painting around each of the snowflakes. When you're painting on an angle like this, the paint at the top will start drying quickly, so you cannot go back over areas you already painted. You need to keep working down the page. So don't rush and take your time to paint around the shapes. As long as you have a bead of wet paint at the bottom, you're good. It actually took me about 14 minutes to paint this wash. If you need to stop to mix up more paint, make sure to leave a nice juicy bead of paint along the bottom edge. That will buy you the time you need to mix up more paint without getting a weird drying line. If you have paint pooling anywhere, you can use another clean, damp brush to soak up excess paint. You can also do the same to remove excess water and paint along the tape edges. The first layer needs to be completely dry before we do the next layer. You can let it air dry or use a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. When the first layer is completely dry, we can trace our second layer of snowflakes. In the finished painting, these snowflakes are going to look like they're behind or below the first layer of snowflakes. So you only need to trace the part of the snowflake that lands on the background in between the other snowflakes. You can definitely overlap with snowflakes from the first layer, but none of the snowflakes you draw on this second layer should be touching each other. Try to position your snowflakes to fill up the large open spaces. Before you start painting, use your kneaded eraser to lighten the pencil lines just enough so you can see them, but they won't be visible in the finished painting. For this layer, mix up another big puddle of your paint color, but add some more pigment this time to make it darker. We want to create a nice contrast between the white of the paper, the first layer of color, and this layer of color. I just realized I forgot to lighten my pencil lines, so I quickly did that before moving on. I propped up my board on the tape roll again, and I'm painting from top to bottom. I think it's the easiest way to get a nice, consistent color throughout. Remember to take your time and paint neatly around each of the shapes. Again, because we're working on an angle, the paint at the top of the page that you already painted has already started drying, so don't go back and touch that paint. Just keep working down the page from top to bottom. It took me about 10 minutes to paint this wash. Let this layer dry completely before moving on to the next step. The background layer is completely dry now, and it's time to decorate these snowflakes. Don't be nervous, I promise it's easier than frosting a cookie. You're going to have so much fun creating these patterns. Before I start painting, I'm using a small ruler and a pencil to draw some guidelines. I'm dividing the snowflake into 6 sections by drawing 3 lines that meet in the center, like a 6-pointed star. These do not have to be perfect, it's just helpful to have them there when you're painting the patterns. Switch to a small round brush. I'm using a number 2. Using the same paint color, I'm starting to doodle patterns on the snowflakes. I don't have them pre-planned. I'm just making them up as I go. You can follow what I'm doing or make up your own patterns. For this first snowflake, I'm starting with a simple border with larger dots at the tips of the snowflake and smaller dots for a border all the way around. I'm adding a larger circle to the center with more dots around it. Then I'm adding a line of dots that gradually get smaller on each arm of the snowflake. On this second snowflake, I'm painting a star shape in the center and then adding some more diamond shapes around the outside. This one reminds me of a hand-cut paper snowflake. If you're a perfectionist like me, it's helpful to remember that you can only achieve a hand-painted look by letting go of perfectionism. You want this to look imperfect. Let them see the hand of the artist. That's what makes hand-painted cards so special, and it's what your recipient will love the most about the card you give them. For this snowflake, I'm painting hearts and filling them in. Then I just repeated that around the snowflake. I added a few more tiny hearts in between to finish it off. Once you get into the flow, I think you'll find that you can relax and explore different patterns and shape ideas. On this next one, I'm painting small dashes all the way around the perimeter of the snowflakes. It looks like it was hand-stitched. Then I made up a design along one of the lines and repeated it around the snowflake. It looked a little plain when I was done, so I went back around and added the little branches that make it look more like a snowflake. There is magic in the repetition. I talk about this in my mark making book. It doesn't matter how sloppy or wonky your marks are. Once you repeat them enough times, they magically turn into a beautiful hand-painted pattern. On this half snowflake, I'm making up a pattern of berries on branches. Don't be intimidated about creating these snowflakes. No 2 snowflakes are alike, and you really can't mess this up. What I do is start on one of the 6 lines coming out from the center. I make a design that follows that line or branches off of it. Don't overthink it. Whatever pattern you create along that line, you just repeat on the other 5 parts of the snowflake. And ta-da, you have a gorgeous snowflake. On this partial snowflake, I'm painting a simple leaf-like pattern. For this last snowflake, I'm taking my inspiration from the other snowflakes I've already painted. I'm using dash lines and dots just in a different way on this snowflake. Once you've decorated all your white snowflakes, your holiday cards are almost done. When the paint is dry, you can erase your pencil guidelines. We're ready to cut and fold our cards. Then I want to share a few more ideas with you to give them an extra special touch. I used a hairdryer to heat up the tape before removing it so my paper wouldn't rip. This is especially important along the center. After removing the tape, I scored the paper in half lengthwise, which is 4.5 inches for this 9 by 12 paper. Then I trimmed off the 1/4 inch white border all around. That brought the width of the paper to 8.5 inches. Then I trimmed an extra 1/2 inch off the length, so the paper is 11 inches tall now. Then I cut the paper in half crosswise at 5.5 inches. The finished folded cards are A2 size, measuring 4.25 inches by 5.5 inches. Now let's add a few extra special touches. These are optional but fun additions. First, you can use a white gel pen or white paint to add dots in the background. It just adds another layer of pattern and it's fun. You can do this before or after you cut your cards. Second, you can use a white gel pen or white paint to add a sentiment to the front of the card. I used a white gel pen to add Happy Holidays to the front of this card. I lightly penciled in my lettering first before going over it with a white gel pen. Third, you can add a little design and your signature to the back of the card. I lightly penciled in my signature and traced the inside of a tape roll to make a guide for a small snowflake. I looked at the front of the card for inspiration for the snowflake design. I painted the snowflake and my signature in the same blue to match the front of the card. Fourth, either instead of or in addition to painting on the back, you can paint a design and sentiment on the inside of the card. I used the same method of tracing the inside of a tape roll as a guide for a snowflake. On this card, I added Happy Holidays below the snowflake. I penciled it in lightly first to get the spacing right, then I painted it. On this other card, I just added a snowflake inside. Oh my goodness, these are so adorable. I cannot wait to make more and give these out this year. I hope you have fun painting these holiday cards too. If you enjoyed this negative painting technique, be sure to check out my negative painting playlist for more tutorials and more advanced versions of this technique.